Okay, now I'm going to tell you a story about one of my first three students, W1. The reason I call him W1 will become apparent in a subsequent story or two. At any rate, W1 was a good enough kid when I met him, but I just never was convinced that his heart was in flying. His father, I was later told, had been an F-4 wing commander in Vietnam, and he had an uncle who was a senior officer in the training command. W1's major in college was art, and he actually was a pretty good artist. As a matter of fact, this is the cover he designed for their class yearbook. But be that as it may, often W1 was not totally prepared for the mission at hand. That, I think, is what eventually got him in the end. But I get ahead of myself. This one particular day, we're flying a contact ride, so we take off on a single engine heavyweight. That's where we take off and we get to a certain altitude, 500 feet, I think, and the instructor pulls an engine back to 60% to simulate an engine failure. The student then flies around the pattern to a single engine heavyweight touch and go, and then out to the area for the rest of the mission. So as we configure and are beginning to fly our final approach, I notice the airspeed's about 10 to 12 knots slow. And I mention it to W1. He corrects and everything's fine. Until we get back to the debrief. Now during the debriefing, we're going through the grade sheet and I get down to single engine heavyweight pattern and landing. And I mentioned to him that his airspeed had gotten about 10 to 12 knots slow. At which time he looks at me with this silly look on his face and he puts his hand up and he says, "Sir, are you sure that was me?" And at that very moment, I wasn't sure. We'd been flying 2 to 3 times a day during that period in hot Oklahoma sun, and you occasionally get tired and so forth. At any rate, I wasn't sure. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt and I moved on. The next day, however, we're up flying the same maneuver, and again he gets 10 to 12 knots slow, only this time I took the aircraft, and I remember saying, "All right, W1, look at your airspeed. Any questions now?" And he said, "No, sir." I said, "Fine." So we just continued on. That was about it for my first experience with W1.